Hi, Bruce Chesum here. Welcome to a Cabinet Vision Minute, the podcast for improving your cabinet vision skills. Today I'll show you how I use Cabinet Vision to create this Morris Console Vanity, and I'll show you how to add it to your Cabinet Vision library. So let's get started. This episode of a Cabinet Vision Minute is brought to you by Craftsman Engineering. Craftsman Woodworks Engineering Services is your first stop for personalized one-on-one cabinet vision training and consulting services. Visit Craftsman Engineering today at craftsmanengineering.com to learn more about upping your cabinet vision game. Just a side note before we get started, this PDF file is available on the website, on the Craftsman Engineering website, for you to download and follow along. Inside this PDF document are these design notes, some plans for the cabinet itself, and a checklist of the plan I'm going to follow for this to document the steps that I go through in Cabinet Vision. So let's look at these design notes for a moment and look on page 1 of that document, and you can kind of see my thoughts as I put this together. So I found this Morris Console Vanity, a simple Google search. And the one that I want to build is about 48 inches wide, so I found one that's kind of similar to that in size. As a designer, here's what I want to accomplish as I build this. In general, this is going to be face frame construction. I'm going to use a technique that I'm going to show you today using applied doors to make these end panels. I'm going to be using rift cut white oak. I want a solid bottom shelf, just like it is in the picture here. I'm going to use Baltic birch drawer boxes. And you can kind of see as you look through these notes here what I want to accomplish. But the big takeaway from these notes is what I'm calling the face frame stuff. So I want this rail to be 1.25 inches. I want the stiles, these two stiles, to be 1.25 inches. And I want these posts on these legs to be 1 3/4 inches. These rails on the ends to be 1.5 inches. The rails on the front would match these end panels, so that's 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, and 1.5 inches. So the first step on our plan is check the materials manager for all the oak, and we're going to add that as necessary. So my thinking in using this planned approach is that I want to make sure that we cover as many bases as we can so that we don't have to circle back and redo something or change something. So for me, planning is the key methodology I'm going to follow. Is make a plan, build the cabinet, follow the plan. Let's go into Cabinet Vision and do just that. Okay, so going into Cabinet Vision, I'm using Cabinet Vision 2021, but this works with just about any version of Cabinet Vision that I could think of. So I'm going to find the materials manager. And the reason we're doing this is just want to check to see that we have all of our unusual materials that we're going to need for this project. And specifically, I'm looking for rift cut white oak. And we have also 1.5 inches and 1 3/4 inches white oak. And if this isn't in there, we want to make sure that we add it to the material manager. I can check off 1 3/4 inches white oak rift cut lumber, and I can check off 1.5 inches white oak rift cut lumber, as well as the 3/4. We're also using panel stock that is going to be 3/4 inch white oak rift cut, so need to check that as well. And we're checking panel stock for 3/4 inch white oak rift cut. And we're good to go on 3/4 oak white rift. Let's go back to our list and we're going to check this off. All right, the next step in our plan is to check the material schedule for these rift cut oak materials. So the material schedules are found here, and we're looking for an assembly material schedule as opposed to all these others. I'm going to find an assembly schedule called oak white rift. And I just want to make sure that on our face frame, we're using oak white rift. And indeed we are. Now this says 13/16, and I do have 3/4 inch listed in here. So I could use that as well. But for all intents and purposes, the message here is make sure that we have the proper material inside of our schedule. And I want to make sure that also for our sheet goods, that 3/4 oak white rift is also used, and nothing generic. This all looks good. I do have some 3/4 birch ply in there, but that's not necessary for this project because we don't have a toe to speak of. Now, one other schedule we need to check, and this is very important for this project, is a door schedule for what I'm calling 1 3/4 inch rift white oak. So I had to create this material schedule under the door category, and in that I want to make sure that we have, as I outlined on the plan set, that the rails and stiles are using the correct material for that door type. The left stile is going to be 1 3/4 inch oak, and the rails are 1.5 inches, and that is really all I need to check for, and I'm happy with what I'm seeing here. We can check off the next item on our list, check material schedules for oak materials. Okay, so we're getting to the secret sauce part of our plan to create this Morris Console Vanity. We're about to create the door for the end panels. So let's go back to Cabinet Vision and let's get out of our schedules. And I'm going to go to the door. It is the door manager. Okay, so we're going to go to the door manager. I have a category in my door manager called Applied End Panels. And this is where I keep things like this, applied doors that I use as end panels or gables. My plan is here to create a new Morris Console Vanity end panel. So I don't have one of those here, but I'm going to do that right now by clicking New. And I'm going to call it Morris Console End Panel. And I'm going to use that for description as well. This is a multi-piece type. It is definitely not a slab, and I'm not using a template. So this is from scratch, multi-piece. So next, oh, and it is a door, not a drawer front. Okay, so the type of door is going to be so it's going to be a flat panel. The panel inset is 1/4 inch, and what that's referring to is the 1/4 inch set into the stiles and rails. So you can make that any number you want. For me, I'm just going to make it 1/4 inch. The left stile I want to be 1 3/4 inches. So that's essentially going to be the posts for this cabinet. So I'm going to type in here 1.75. The right stile also 1.75. The top rail I want that to be 1.5 inches, and the bottom rail 1.5 inches. I don't want a miter. This is all that you need to do at this point. Now I want to come back and I want to section this just like you would section a cabinet. I'm going to section this door so it looks like the end panel I ultimately want it to look like. I'm not going to worry about the tags or the cost or any of that business right now. I don't want any edge banding on this, so I'm going to change that to N for none. The outside edge profiles, I don't want any outside edge profile either. Just basically, square as it comes off the saw. And the defaults for this, I want to use a default material schedule, which is the one we just checked a few minutes ago. And that was the 1 3/4 inch rift white oak. Using this material schedule for the door, that now tells Cabinet Vision that I want this stile to be 1 3/4, whereas the rails are going to be 1.5 inches, because that's what we specified in the schedule for that. I want to save the changes, yes. So it still doesn't look like that, but because we haven't sectioned it yet. So let's go back and section it, and we do that in the using this section button here. So clicking on section, the top is 1.5 inches. That's good. The stiles are 1 3/4 inches. Now I want to divide this panel up into 3 different sections. If you look on page 2, the end view 3/2. So I'm going to do a horizontal multi-split, and I want to go to 3 equal sections. That's fine. This top section, if we look on end view 3.2, okay, so here looking at our end view, we have 3-inch clearance for the bottom rail. We have a panel here that is going to, I'm using 3/4 inch stock for this. No panel here and no panel on the bottom, and these are already set at 1.5 inches. So let's go back to Cabinet Vision here. And so this bottom rail, I'm going to set that to 0 width, and I want the height of this panel to be 3 inches, and I want to lock that height. It still shows the machining here for the panel, and since we don't have a panel, we don't need the machining either. So I'm going to change that inset to 0, and then you can see that it takes away that those dados there. And the same for this panel. I don't want any inset there, and it's going to ask me for the type of panel. So I want to make sure that this says none. So it virtually removes the panel. Okay, now we still need to set the height of this top one here. Whoops, I need to change that to 0. That's good. Okay, that's looking better. The height of this top panel is determined by the distance from here to here. And if we look in our plans, we can see that that distance is 20 and 3/4 from the bottom here to the top there. So 20 3/4. So let's go back and look in that in Cabinet Vision. So if we know that this is 1.5 inches, this is 1.5 inches, we want this to be 20 3/4 minus 3. And let me explain that math here. 20 3/4 minus 1.5 minus another 1.5. So that's 20 3/4 minus 3. And so I'm going to use that in here for the height of this panel. I'm going to say 20.75 minus 3. And I'm happy with the height of that, and I want to lock that in. So now if I look at this in 3D, what we have is, so that's looking pretty good. If my material schedule is set up, I believe that's going to look correct on the end product. So let's just call this done for now. I think it is, and we'll come back and check this later if indeed that panel is not set in there quite correct. I'm going to make one little correction to this Morris Console end panel. So I'm going to double click on that, and I think I mentioned that this was a flat panel. The correction is this, I want this to be a slab. And the difference is that in the material schedules for this door, the slab is 3/4 inch panel stock, the rift cut. So I want to make sure that that is a slab. All other changes are okay. You can change the size to whatever you want it to be. I want it to be 21 inches wide by 35 1/4, which is what our case is going to be. Ultimately 35 1/4 to the bottom of the top, from the floor to the bottom of the top. And other than that, that's the only corrections I wanted to make. This episode of A Cabinet Vision Minute is brought to you by Craftsman Engineering. Did you know that most Cabinet Vision users gain their Cabinet Vision knowledge through on-the-job training, like from their boss or from a fellow employee or from a previous employer? That means that 99% of Cabinet Vision users have little or no formal Cabinet Vision training. Craftsman Engineering exists to fix that statistic. I'm Bruce Chesimon. I'm the founder of Craftsman Engineering. I've trained hundreds of Cabinet Vision users all over the United States and Canada, and I can help you improve your productivity through one-on-one personalized Cabinet Vision instruction at your speed, addressing your pain points, and on your schedule. Take the time to up your Cabinet Vision game by calling me today, or check the links in the show notes below and contact me on the website. Craftsman Engineering exists to help you become a more productive Cabinet Vision user. Okay, now comes the fun part. We actually get to create a job, a room, and we're going to add a base cabinet to that. You notice that up to this point, we haven't even started our job. Everything up to this point has been just preparation, making sure we're getting all our ducks lined up so that we can get to this point. So let's get on there. Okay, so I'm going to create a new job. The job number, I'm not too concerned about right now, but for lack of something else, I'm going to put 2021, job number 13. I'm going to call this the Morris Console Vanity. Since we don't have a real customer here, I'm not going to fill that out. Room 1 is fine, but you can call it bathroom. For the construction type, I'm going to make sure that this is set to face frame. The drawer box I want to be just a 5-piece drawer, and we don't have any rollouts, so I'm not really concerned about that. For materials, this is why it was important to do our homework earlier and set up our materials schedules for this. So our material schedules, we don't really have an upper, but I'm going to go ahead and fill it anyhow, just as a also oak white rift. I'm going to get really good at finding oak white rift here. Base material schedule, this is important. Oak white rift, the exposed, even though we're not using this, I'm going to fill it in anyhow. Oak white rift. The drawer box I want to be Baltic birch. It doesn't have rollout, so I'm not concerned about that. For hardware, this is important, and I'll show you in just a minute why. The hinge schedule, we want to make sure that we pick the inset, an inset hinge schedule. The hinge schedule is what determines whether or not, or how the doors sit on the face frame. So we want these doors and drawers to sit into the face frame as flush inset, so I'm using this inset schedule. The pull schedule, for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to put no pulls. And the drawer guide schedule I want to use is the Tandem 563H, because in my system I have this set up to be not only visually correct as far as sizing the drawers and setting the height of the drawer in relation to the hardware correct. I'm real happy with these schedules here, and the doors is the only other thing that I need to set up before we actually start building this. I'm going to go to the base and I'm going to pick that door style I want. In this case, this style here, which has a vertical member, a style or a mullion rather, for this door. So it's called Auburn in this case. So I'll pick that one. The default material schedule is oak white rift, which is a good thing. And this base end panel, I want this to be my Morris Console end panel. And the default schedule for that is set correctly. Good. Now the only other schedule that I want to make sure is correct is to pick the drawer, and I don't want vertical grain, I want horizontal grain. So I'm going to pick the slab horizontal grain, and the default for that is oak white rift. So I believe all of these schedules are set for what we're building here. Clicking OK. I'm just going to add a wall. Don't care how long it is. Doesn't really matter. Catalog and take just a standard base cabinet. Set that here. And let's size this to 48 inches wide and 35 1/4. And we want our depth to be, what's it, 20 3/4. 20.75. Okay, so not unlike any other base cabinet you've ever set against a wall. Okay, let's go double click on this now, and let's add our applied end panels that we made previously. So applied door, and this one's going to be an applied door, and you can see that it did add those applied doors that we set up earlier. Okay, but it, there's obviously some things that we need to correct here, so let's get on that. Back to our section editor here, I'm going to hide all of our toe parts. So under modifications, hide parts, let's hide all of our toe parts. Okay, and let's change the size of these applied doors to their correct size. So first of all, there is no up and down. They want them to sit on the floor. So let's make that, and we want the height of that to be 35 1/4. So let's change the length dy to 35.25, and that looks good. And let's do the same with this guy over here. No up down, height 35 1/4. Okay, but since we want our end panels to sit, let's look at the top here just for a second. We want these applied doors to sit proud of the face frame by 1/4 inch. So let's do that by adjusting this width to 21. And you can see that this one comes out correctly because the origin of that door is in the back corner here. And when we click on the other door, we can see that the origin is on the front. So if we add the 21, if we make this 21 over here, the width, we now get that width in the back here. There's a, it's sitting 1/4 inch proud of the, or less proud of the back of the cabinet. So we need to adjust that to bring it out the other way. So let's make sure that our in-out is also set to 21. So we're adjusting the origin down here to sit proud in the room. So 21 ought to do that, and it did. So going back to the section editor, all right, we're making some progress here. Now we want to change the height of this toe kick. So it's 14 and a half inches high. So let's do that under Properties and change that toe height to 14.5. Now it looks like that it has messed up our applied doors. It simply raised them up. So the height and depth and all the other settings are correct. So let's adjust those once again to bring this Y down to 0 so it makes those sit on the floor. So let's just adjust that to 0 and adjust this one over here to 0. We can see that this bottom rail is in line with the end rail of our end panel. So far our planning has paid off. Oh, one other thing, we can see that this 3/4 inch panel here is now stepping back 1/4 inch from this mid rail and top rail, and an inch and half an inch from our posts, our stiles. So if we look at that in 3D and zoom in on that, we can see that our panel here is placed exactly where we want it. So this is all coming together real nicely. The face frame is set back 1/4 inch. Now we need to do some sectioning on the cabinet itself. So let's go handle that. We're going to ultimately eliminate this left stile and right stile because if you look on our plans, we don't have that there. So let's do some sectioning here on the cabinet first. By pushing the delete key, it's going to remove all of our guts of our cabinet here. Okay, let's divide this into three open sections, and I want to further divide this section with a horizontal and this one with a horizontal split. Now let's address some things that are going on with the face frame here. I'm not sure why that gave that a 2 1/4 inch mid rail there, but it doesn't matter because we're going to change that. So I first want to remove this style. So I'm just going to change the width to 0. Now I'm going to remove this style over there by changing its width to 0. And then according to our plans, if we look at our design notes, we want this short rail to be 1 1/4 inch. I want the style to be 1 1/4 inch, this style to be 1 1/4 inch, and this to be 1 1/4 inch. I'm going to change this to a drawer. This is going to be a drawer. And I want the width of this to be 10 3/8. And I want the height of these drawers to be equal. So I'm going to take 12 plus 4.5, which is 16.5, divided by 2. 16.5 divided by 2, that equals 8 1/4. That's 8 1/4. So that looks good. I'm going to lock that height in, and I'm going to lock that width in. And I'm going to do the same on the other side here. 10 3/8 by 8 1/4, and the height to be 8 1/4. I'm going to lock that height in and lock that width. Now this section I want to be a pair of doors, and I believe that's all I want to do for the front of this. Let's look at this in 3D for a second. Zoom out, and we're looking pretty good. Okay, the next thing I want to do is add in our internal parts. So let's go back to our section editor and go to the section interior. And I want to add in 3 partitions here. So I'm going to do a vertical multi-split with partitions. And it's not going to set them in the right place. That's okay. I can move those, and I want those to be just on the edge of my face frame. So I'm going to line that up with the edge of the face frame, and the same with the other partition. We're going to line it up with the edge of the face frame. And now I want to add in another partition that lines up with the top of this face frame, because that's what is going to support this drawer guide over on the right side of these drawer boxes and the left side of these drawer boxes. So let's take this and add a horizontal split, and we want to make sure that this is type fixed shelf. And I'm just going to line it up with the top of that face frame. If you zoom in, the more accuracy you're going to have with placing these. Okay, then I want to go to the other side and split that one, and then we're going to call that a fixed shelf. And then again, we want to place that at the top of our face frame. Zoom in, check for the accuracy. That looks good. Okay, then let's do a 3D view here. We have our parts in place. We probably don't need these members here right now, especially since we're going to have a sink inside there. But so far, we're looking real good. So the only other thing we want to do at this point is add some parts for the bottom. So let's do that right now. Okay, so we've really made a lot of progress so far. The only thing that we need to do, looks like, is add in the parts for the bottom here, the bottom rail. There's a front and back rail and the bottom shelf. So we're going to go to the cabinet editor for this. I sometimes call it the section editor, but we want to be in one of these three orthographic views to add the front rail here and the back rail across there, and also the bottom shelf. The methodology we're going to use to do that is this new part feature, and the part type that we want to add first is this front rail and back rail. So the part group is going to be an assembly part group, as opposed to, we know it's not a door, it's not a countertop, it's not none of these other things, but it definitely is part of an assembly. Let's, and the type of part we want to add, let's call this a face frame part or a bottom rail. So there's bottom rail. The material we want to use is going to be 1.5 by 1.5 rift cut white oak. So if I click change material there, it's going to bring up this material utility, and so I'm going to select 1.5 inch white rift cut lumber. I think I have that listed in another way also, but this is fine. It's the right material. Okay, clicking next. The length of that piece is going to be 48 inches minus 1 3/4 minus 1 3/4. So let's reach for our calculator. 48 minus 1.75 minus 1.75 equals 44.5 inches. The width of that is the orientation of the part. Means how do we want this part to show when we lay it in here. I'm going to pick this top one here is fine, and I'm going to push finish, and you can see it lays it down in the bottom. And if we go to a plan view, we can see that it's on the back, laying on the back side of the bottom of the cabinet. So on the floor, we need to raise it up by 3 inches so it lines up with the bottom of this rail. So let's click on that, and let's call this up down 3 inches. And we want the left and right position to be 1 3/4 to line up with this edge here. It pushes it over to the right. And let's check now by going to a plan view that is in the right place. Let's go to 3D view, and it does look like it's sort of in the right place. Now, why is it back 1/4 inch? So we need to set it forward so that we want this edge here to line up with the edge of the inside of the leg. So let's go back to our plan view, click on that bottom rail, and the YXZ position is what we want to increase by 1/4 inch. Now let's go back to that 3D view, and we can see that now the post in the corner is now 1/4 inch proud, and this corner lines up perfect. Okay, so let's now go back to our face view, and let's add another bottom rail. New part, bottom rail, 1.5 inch rift cut. Next, we want to keep those dimensions. Next, and finish. And we're going to pause right there. So this piece we need to move over to the right also 1.75 inches and elevate it by 3 inches. And we want the in out, the Z position of this. Let's go to the plan view and let's figure out what we want the Z position of this to be. So we want the back side of the piece to line up with this corner here. So the distance from this edge to the back here is 20 3/4 minus 1 3/4 inches, or 19 inches. Is that right? So let's try 19. So let's go to I think it's the second bottom rail. Yeah, it's that one. And let's try this in out to be 19 inches. It's just off. Let's try 19 1/4. Okay, that looks better. Let's go to a 3D. Yep, and that did put it exactly in the right place. So the only other piece we need to add here is the solid piece that goes in here. So we're going to do that with the same methodology by adding a part. So let's do that now. One of the 3 orthographic views. Let's say new part. And this time I'm going to pick type fixed shelf. And I want the material to be 3/4 inch oak white rift. I want this to be 17.5 inches wide, if my math is correct. And I want it to be 44.5 inches long, the same length as the rails. That orientation looks good to me. And finish. And there it is laying on the bottom. So the left to right, again, I want that to be 1.75. And I want the Y position, the up down, to be 3 plus 3/4 of an inch. So 3 3/4 of an inch. And I want the in out to be 1.75. Is that correct? Yeah, 1.75. All right, let's look at that in 3D. And it does look good. Now, why is it brown and the rest of them are this tan color? It's because I think I mentioned I have a couple different flavors of 3/4 inch rift cut white oak. And I picked the one that is not commonly used in this cabinet. I picked the other one. You can see it's the same for these partitions. They're also using this kind of 3/4 inch. It's fine. It's not a big deal. It's going to show up on our lists correctly. It's just it has a different color assigned to it in Cabinet Vision. So it looks like just about everything is done now that I would want to save in the library, with the exception of the top. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to do that in the same way that we just added this bottom shelf by selecting New Part. And this time, it's not going to be an assembly, it's going to be a countertop. And I want it to be the part type countertop in the part group countertop. And this material QS1 is fine. That's 3 mil, I think, thick. The length of that, I want it to be, let's go back to my design notes. I want that to be 21.25 by 49. Okay, there it is laying on the bottom again. The Z position is on the bottom. It's the back bottom corner of this top. So I want the Z position to be up 35.25. Whoops, not that one. I want that to be Y position. 35.25, 35.25. Okay, that's better. And I want that to be to the left of the widest part of the cabinet by 1/4 of an inch. Oh, I think that was supposed to be -1/2. That looks better. So equal on both sides. Okay, and then let's look at this in 3D. Do we need to do anything else to that? Nope, it looks like it's in the right place. So I'm pretty happy with this so far. Transparency view, it's looking good. All the parts are in the right place. All the parts are built. Okay, the last step in our plan is to save the cabinet to our cabinet library. Actually, we're going to go back here to our elevation view. I'm going to right-click on the cabinet and push Save, and then Save As. This is a very important distinction I want to make between Save and Save As. You'll recall that the cabinet that we picked to make this was just a standard base cabinet. If we push Save right now and choose this selection, we will be overwriting our standard base cabinet. We don't want to do that. We want to create a new cabinet type or new cabinet in our library. And the way we do that is by choosing Save As option. So I'm going to push Save As and overwrite the name Standard Base, and I'm going to name it Morris Console Vanity. And in my description, I'll also use the same name. I want to preserve the height and depth and attributes of this, and I want to save it in my custom cabinets catalog. That's fine with me. However, I can pick any catalog that I have, and I have a lot of cabinets here, but let's just, for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to save it in my custom cabinets library under the base cabinets section of that library, and it will be named the Morris Console Vanity. I can pick an icon. There's a number of icons I can pick from. The one that I'll use for this is just the standard one. Let me pick a different one just to illustrate that. So let me use, I'll pick this one that looks like a little desk. That's fine. And I'm also going to go to this Advanced tab. This is very important also because I can pick some placement options so that this is always going to go. I only want it to go like in a wall. I can never be in a corner or whatever. Am I going to allow stretching of this? Sure, why not? Now, bear in mind that when I do stretch this cabinet in any one of these dimensions, that could affect the parts that we added, such as this bottom rail, the bottom rail in the back, and the fixed shelf that we added in here also. So if we make this wider than 48 inches, for example, this will not stretch with that unless we add some intelligence to those parts, which will then take into account the stretching. So I will allow this to be stretched, but for the purposes of this video today, I'm not going to add in the intelligence, so to give these parts their object intelligence. I'm just showing you how to add to a library. I want to preserve the guide material, the hinge material. I want to preserve the assembly material, the oak, roof cut white oak. I want to preserve the construction method so that it's always going to use this construction method versus the construction method for the rest of the room. So this will be essentially an override for the room. I'm going to override all of these things: the drawer box construction, the door and applied door end style. I definitely want to use those, and the drawer front style. I have no aliases, so but I did check an awful lot of these here. Now, what does that mean? I'll show you in just a second. So I'm going to click OK there. Again, I need to reselect my icon here because it has fallen off of that. I'm ready to push OK. Okay, and then I'm going to go back here to my library now, and you can see that in the bottom of my base cabinet library, I now have the Morris Console Vanity added to it with an image of that down here that I can spin that around so you can get an idea of what that looks like there. So remove this cap. Well, I'm not going to remove it. I'll just set it off to the side. Remember, this is built on a standard base cabinet, and add another cabinet so we can do a kind of a side-by-side comparison. Objects, Morris Console, it's added in here. Now let's look at this from an elevation. I can't tell any difference, can you? Let's look at 3D, two of the same thing. So that means I can delete number one, and this one has been added to our library. And there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Look for more at Craftsman Engineering.